Today in the Fresh Run Club, my race recap for the 2023 Indianapolis Monumental Marathon. Plus, if you're thinking about running the Monumental Marathon in the future, here's my advice. Welcome to the Fresh Run Club. Today's video, I am recapping my 2023 Indianapolis Monumental Marathon. So I posted a video earlier that was my vlog. That was kind of my real-time experience of what it was like to run the Indy Marathon. This is more of a recap looking back. I'm going to get into a little bit of data. I've had some time to kind of let the marathon marinate, to digest. And these are my thoughts on what it was like to run the Indy Marathon. So I don't want to just make this video all about me and my times and my splits and me overcoming insurmountable odds to run a fairly average marathon finish time. I do want to make this a little bit helpful for someone watching this video. If you're thinking about running a future Indianapolis Marathon, hopefully I can help. Hopefully I can kind of show what it's like to run in the marathon and maybe give some tips, some advice if you're thinking about running this, or if you've already signed up for the 2024, 2025, 2090 Indianapolis Monumental Marathon. Hopefully we're still doing marathons in 2090. Hopefully I'm doing the 2090 Indianapolis Monumental Marathon. So what I want to do today is just break down my race, really starting with the day of the marathon, and then just kind of taking you through the 26.2 all the way to the finish, and then even a little bit beyond. So rewinding just a little bit, the reason I ran the Indy Marathon was basically because, I didn't get into the Chicago Marathon. So I was looking for an alternative. I wanted something that was a flat course. I wanted to be able to drive to it from Metro Detroit, and I wanted it to take place in a major metro area, so I didn't have to rent a yurt in the woods in order to attend that marathon, which I did not have to rent a yurt in the woods. I will get to the hotel in a second, but I trained all summer starting in June with the Hanson's Marathon Method, and this was really the first year that I actually did the method. I've used this before, but I haven't stuck to it. So this year I didn't get hurt, I didn't get sick, I didn't go on a vacation and forget my running shoes. I calculated about 97% of the workouts I completed. So heading into this marathon, I was feeling very, very prepared and very excited to run a marathon, because I felt like for the first time I have a real shot at accomplishing a pretty big goal of mine. So what was that goal? Again, I don't love to talk about my times and my splits and my pace. I want to make this relatable to people of all paces. I don't think my times are particularly impressive, but for the sake of this video, I do want to break down some of the numbers. So I wanted to run a 3 hour and 30 marathon. Specifically, I wanted to run a 3 hour, 29 minute, 59 second marathon. Break 3:30 was my goal, which is basically 8 minutes per mile for 26.2 miles. So that was a goal I set at the beginning. My PR heading into this was 3 hours and 49 minutes and 12 seconds or something like that. My goal was to cut off a pretty significant chunk from my previous PR. And that's what I set out to do. So before we jump into race day, I do want to talk very briefly about the hotel situation. I mentioned this in my vlog, but I booked my hotel through the Indianapolis Marathon's website, which took me to the Visit Indy website. There was a hotel block of rooms at a hotel reserved apparently for the marathon, maybe, not really sure. I would not recommend doing this. First of all, the reservation was not in my name until a couple weeks before, so you're kind of messing with third parties, makes me a little bit nervous. And second of all, and the most important thing, and this will come back to matter in the end, there was no late checkout. They didn't have late checkout. And I was not the only person checking in at the front desk the day before the marathon that was not happy about this. The Le Méridien Hotel, for whatever reason, could not offer late checkout to the people that were there to run the marathon who booked at that hotel through the marathon's website. The race started at 8, checkout was noon, so you can kind of see I'm trying to run a 3 hour 30 marathon. You got to finish, go through the chute. I got to walk back to the hotel, so pressure was on. I basically had to run a PR if I wanted to take a shower before a 6 hour drive home. So that put a little bit of added pressure on my time, but again, I would just recommend booking directly with a hotel. Don't mess with third parties, just as a general rule of hotel booking, and just make sure you can confirm that late checkout before you book the hotel. That's a mistake I learned the hard way. So anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the actual race day. So I woke up and I went straight to the Indiana Convention Center, which is where packet pickup was, and they had kind of a setup for the marathon runners. I would highly recommend doing this. It was inside, it was warm, there was plenty of carpet to kind of spread out and stretch out if you wanted. They opened up one of the big rooms, and there was plenty of room where I could even do a little bit of a warm-up lap inside, which was awesome because it was dark out, it was raining, it was cold. Doing a warm-up in those conditions wouldn't be great, so it was awesome that I had the opportunity to warm up inside. The bathroom situation, not a ton of bathrooms in that area, so just kind of plan ahead there, but it was fine. There was someone at the convention center that was like, hey, everybody head over now, and that was about 25 minutes before the race was going to start, so about 7:35 a.m., which that was good timing. I think getting to the starting line about 20 minutes, maybe 15, 20 minutes before the start is good, which kind of gets to my next point. The starting line is on a pretty narrow road, so it is very crowded, not only on the actual street where the race takes place, but also kind of on the periphery, on the sort of grass and sidewalk area. There's just tons of people. So just be warned, it gets really crowded down there. So I put my time in for 3:30 when I registered, and I was assigned to Corral C. However, when I got to the starting area, I noticed that my pace group for 3:30 was in Corral B. So I wasn't really sure, are there multiple pace groups in each corral, kind of like Chicago, or should I go into the corral ahead of mine? I ended up just going into Corral B instead of Corral C. Nobody was checking bibs. Nobody stopped me. No one was even looking. It wasn't a big deal at all. I would recommend when you get to the starting line, just find your pace group. Look for those little signs that have the final time that you want to run and just go there, regardless of what your bib says. It is really important that you don't get into the wrong corral because it is about a 5-minute gap between each corral, each wave from the start, and then the next one, there's a 5-minute delay. So if you're in the wrong corral and your pace group takes off, you're going to be 5 minutes behind. So I don't recommend that. So even though I did jump to the next corral, I was still in the back of Corral B. So I did have some catching up to do. So the gun went off, extremely crowded, although it ended up not really mattering. But just a heads up, it's a narrow road. There's a ton of people. It was pretty slow. And I was really concerned because I wanted to catch up to that pace group, and I was kind of far back. So I had a little bit of work to do. So I had to weave in and out, sort of navigate the crowds. There's a couple twists and turns downtown Indianapolis when you first start. So just something to keep in mind. At the beginning, it was kind of this internal battle of do I push it and try to catch up to the pace group quickly, or do I run what I wanted to do, which was a relaxed first couple of miles and not burn myself out. So it was this internal struggle. Eventually I could see the pace group and kind of realize that I was gradually catching up. It was going to be a long race. I didn't need to worry about sprinting to catch the pace group. I ended up catching them probably just before 4 miles. Actually, when we crossed into the Monument Circle, which is what the marathon is named for, there's this big monument in the middle of it. Kind of reminded me of Campus Martius in Detroit. So very cool area, tons of people, just that city hustle and bustle that I really wanted in a city marathon. So that's kind of when I caught up to the pace group, which was a big relief for me. And I also didn't feel super fatigued doing that. So both of those concerns were sort of erased pretty quickly. So yeah, my first 5 or 6 miles felt amazing. I just was very in control and relaxed, and I was just focusing on having a short stride. I didn't want to overstride and heel strike too much. So yeah, everything was going really, really well for me. When I did catch up to the pace group, they did note that they were a little bit ahead. So they said at that time they were about 40 seconds ahead of pace, which it happens. There was someone next to me that was like, oh, Indy is notorious for having bad pacers, which I was kind of okay, it's not easy to do. First of all, it's very crowded at the start, like I mentioned. Second of all, you're downtown, so the buildings mess up the GPS. So I don't know, it happens. But they were very communicative. They communicated very well with the group and said hey, here's where we're at. Here's the plan. We're going to kind of go easy a little bit, but we're going to get you in at that 3-hour 30 mark because that's all that matters. I do appreciate the communication from the two guys that were pacing the 3:30 group. If you're watching this video, thank you. You did an awesome job. I didn't have time to say thank you for pacing me, but I really appreciate the work that you did to pace the 3:30 group. The other thing I noticed pretty quickly, and I mean it's on the map, so I shouldn't have been super surprised by this. It just felt like every time I looked up, oh, there's water. Oh, there's noon, which was awesome that they had noon. That was huge. That was clutch for me that they had noon and not Gatorade or just water. They had gels. It was really good. And there was also fan support along the way where people were handing out stuff. I'll get to that later. But there was a lot of aid stations. The crowd support in the first, I would say first 6 miles was awesome. you're downtown, so there was tons of people there. There was like running groups. I think there was some bands. Like it was a good time, definitely. So lots of cheering, lots of adrenaline. Like you really do get a good start in the Indy Marathon. So I was really happy with how the first 6 or so miles went. So I'm just chugging along. I did mention kind of the narrow streets. One of the biggest criticisms and kind of one of my concerns heading into this race was that it is a very narrow course, which it did get a little bit cramped. But once the half marathon group split off from the marathon group, I think things got a little more calm. I would say it was never really a problem, like the narrowness of the roads. I can see where it might have been an issue, and I'll get to more of why it wasn't an issue for me a little bit later when I get further into the race. The other thing that I saw about this race was the potholes and the road conditions. Yeah, honestly, the roads were not in great shape. Again, shout out to my pacers. They did a really good job of like calling out the potholes and saying like pothole or, puddle, like all that stuff. So they were really cool about that. But yeah, the roads weren't in the best shape. However, I'm from Metro Detroit. I think we have like statistically the worst roads in America. So like, yeah, I've been training on awful roads for a long time. I got through it. Just pay attention to where you're running. Like it's not that hard. Roads aren't great, but you'll survive. All right, so moving along, part of my strategy was to go without music for the first 10 miles. And when I got to mile 10, I was going to turn my music on and kind of get that boost. And that's exactly what I did. And it worked out really well. Like the miles kind of just flew by the first 10 miles. I was feeling good, in control, relaxed. And then I turned the music on and that's when I really like got into the zone. So that is when I went out a little bit ahead of the pace group. I did that for a couple reasons. One, like I said, I was just in the zone. The music really had me fired up. 2, it did give me a little more space to breathe. So I've been training by myself. I like running by myself. So it felt a little more natural for me to just be out a little bit ahead of the pace group and not have as many people around me. Like the first 10 miles, it was fine, but I was sort of jockeying for position within the pace group, which I didn't have to do when I kind of went out in front. And there were points throughout the race where like I didn't know where the pace group was. Sometimes I could hear them talking. Sometimes I couldn't. So I was trying not to look back as much as I could, because when I was in high school, I heard that like if you look behind you, that means you've already like defeated yourself mentally. So you should never look behind you. I don't know if that's just a bunch of like nonsense, but I adhere to that. So I was trying as hard as I could to not look behind me for most of the race. So that's kind of when I pulled away from that 3:30 pace group and started to do my own race a little bit. I got to the 13-mile mark and then obviously the halfway mark, 13.1. And that's kind of when the race started. There was a little moment I had where it was like, whoa, 13.1 miles. I'm halfway. I have halfway to go. That's a long time. And you don't want to dwell in that place for a very long time if you're running a marathon. You want to think positive and think like, hey, I'm crushing it. You don't want to overwhelm yourself with how much mileage and more importantly, how many hours you have left of running. That was when it was like, okay, this is real. Like the race has begun. The race against the clock is starting. So, time to really buckle in. And at that point, like you have been running through and start to go through a bunch of different neighborhoods, which was really cool. I love that about the Detroit Marathon. You run through this neighborhood called Indian Village. It's my favorite part to run in. There were a lot of neighborhoods like that in Indianapolis, which was cool. So you had people outside like handing stuff out, whether it was like water or candy or I don't know, there was a band that was playing, guy was doing a guitar solo, there was a German band, there was all sorts of stuff going on, which was really cool to get that crowd support. So shout out to everybody who was out on the course supporting runners that they didn't even know. But yeah, it was very good to get sort of that crowd support. So I was feeling good. You start to get a little bit tired after 13.1 miles, but you're just sort of just chugging along. There were a couple rolling hills. I think this was the first time where I learned what a rolling hill actually is. Previously, I ran the Cleveland Marathon. They have a big hill at like mile 24 and a half. That's not rolling. That's just like a scary big hill. These were like rolling hills. They were very manageable, kind of churning along. And then I got to mile 18 and that's where it was like, okay, time to really buckle down. 8 miles to go. I started to feel really fatigued. My muscles started to get a little bit sore. And that's my biggest concern. Like my downfall in previous marathons has been my quads tightening up. And you start to feel that just a little bit. And every once in a while I get a little twinge, where they would like almost cramp up, but not quite. So I was getting kind of nervous at mile 18. And at that point, you're like really far north. And that was like by far the most desolate part. You run through this like park, I think, some kind of park. It almost reminded me of like a zoo. I'm not really sure what it was in hindsight. Indianapolis residents, let me know exactly what that was. But you run through some kind of park and it was like very quiet. And that's when it's like, you know, your thoughts get very loud and your muscles start to get sore. And that's kind of when it really kicks in that like, hey, this is going to be a tough thing because look, it's the marathon. So that was really when the race started to get difficult for me. So, you know, I'm just churning along. Again, I'm hitting my splits. My GPS watch was off, but I had not been passed by the pace group. So in my mind, I was like, as long as I can stay in front of that pace group, I'm on pace and I don't have to worry about the fact that my Garmin is telling me that I'm running slower than it actually feels like I'm running. I'm just going to ignore my Garmin except for my nutrition plan, which was to have a Morton gel every 30 minutes. So I was just basically checking my watch to see when I got to the next 30 minutes, which I thought was great. I just broke the marathon up into these 30-minute segments, and I got a little treat at the end of each 30-minute segment, which was the Morton gel. I split between the gel 100 and the calf 100, which I think worked really well. So I'm really happy with like my fuel and nutrition strategy. So then I was like, okay, get to mile 20, which means you only have 6 left, which like a 6-mile run, that's like my easiest run that I go on throughout the training process. Like no big deal, right? Well, you know, that's when the miles start to drag out and you're starting to look at your watch a little bit more. I'm starting to think like, is the pace group coming up, you know, behind me? It was kind of confusing because people were passing me at that point, not the pace group, but just like random people. But I was also passing other people. So like I had no idea. And there's this weird like mental thing that happens where, at least for me, I just assume that everybody around me knows exactly what they're doing and they are running the exact pace that they want to run. So when someone passes me, I'm like, oh no, I need to stick with that person. Like they're running a smart race. I'm running a slow race. If I pass someone, I think, ooh, I'm going too fast. They know what they're doing. They're conserving their energy for, you know, the last 2-3 miles. Maybe I need to slow down. The reality is like most people just don't know what they're doing. And then we got to mile 21 and that's when it was like, okay, this is tough. And that's where I like said into the camera, like I'm crashing. I was falling apart. So mile 22, I felt like there were a couple more hills. Again, there like wasn't many people out at that point in the race. And then mile 23 was when things got really hard. So previously I was basically running about a 7:55 pace the entire time. It was like deja vu all over again from Cleveland where like, you know, I got that far and my legs tightened up and I just got tired and started falling apart. So that was not good. I was in a not good place. I wouldn't even call it the pain cave. I would say it would be like the fatigue cave. I was just tired. Like I just wanted it to be over. It was no longer like fun anymore. It was like survival mode. Now looking at my actual pace, mile 23, I ran an 8:06. So it wasn't like I was super slow, but I could kind of feel myself slowing down. Plus, I think other people were starting to actually pick up the pace to finish strong. And then there was also wind like blasting you. So that's probably the biggest thing that like made me feel tired at that point was the wind. So I was working actually a lot harder than my pace showed. If I would have guessed at what my pace actually was, I would have said like 9-minute miles. Like that's what it felt like I was running. Like my stride became just a disaster. Like I just was really tired. Things were not going particularly well at that point for me. So then mile 24 and 25 just became survival. And in my mind, the entire time, I was just thinking, stay in front of the pace group. Every second, I expected to hear, you know, the footsteps and see the 2 guys in lime green shirts with the stick past me. And I just said to myself, like, I want to stay ahead of these guys just 1 mile at a time. Okay, mile 23, stay ahead, check. Okay, mile 24, 1 more mile, just want to stay ahead of these guys, check. Mile 25, 1 more mile, just want to stay ahead of these guys, check. They never passed me, which I think the reality of what happened was for the first like 22 miles, they were catching me. At one point, I put my camera up to see if I could see them behind me, and they were like right there. And that was kind of where I was like, okay, look, I only have about 2 miles to go. I'm just going to like leave it all out there. I'm not going to let them pass me. I'm just going to power through this, you know. And at that point, like my brain is not working. I'm trying to do the math because my GPS had an extra 0.10 miles on it. So I was trying to calculate like, okay, I have to subtract that. Also, I have to add on the 0.2 at the end of the marathon. And I was just like completely lost in the math at that point. I was just like, I'm just going to run as hard as I can to the finish. So anyway, my mile 24 and 25 were my 2 slowest miles, and then mile 26 That was when like you start to head downtown. There's more people. At one point, I heard someone along the course say just 2 more turns, which was absolutely not true. There were definitely 3 more turns. So I was just like completely confused, but running as hard as I could. So I ran a 7:41 last mile split, which was one of my fastest. And then that last point for me was 0.3, just because if you don't run the tangents, you end up running a little bit more. That was a 6:53. So like when I kind of got to the end and I knew it was the end, you kind of round this corner, you turn right, and you can see the finish line. I just was like, I do not want to miss any of my goals by 1 second. I want to run as hard as I could. So there were 2 thoughts in my mind: run as hard as I possibly can, and 2, look like I'm having fun. Because I didn't love how I looked in the video from the Cleveland Marathon. I just looked like slow and lumbering. So I was like, okay, smile, be happy as you cross the finish line. I'm looking at my watch. I'm like, okay, I'm actually going to do it. I'm actually going to get not just my PR, but I'm going to break 3:30 like by a pretty significant margin. And I had been doing the math, but like I wasn't totally sure if I was doing the math right. But once I kind of got to that last straightaway, I knew I was going to do it, but I just wanted to like make sure that, hey, maybe my watch was off, or like, I don't know, something's wrong. So I'm just going to run as hard as I could. Looking back at the pictures of me running on the finish line, I don't look happy. I look like I'm screaming in pain. But I did finish. My final time was 3 hours, 27 minutes, and 42 seconds. So I beat my PR by like 22 minutes, and I beat my actual goal time by like 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So all in all, a fantastic run. Shout out to the Pacers. They definitely like helped me to not only run a good first half, but also like push me at the end, because I was scared to death that if they passed me, I would lose all motivation and just like walk on the side of the road like I'm Charlie Brown. So anyway, I crossed the finish line, and what is on my mind? Get to the hotel as fast as possible, because at that point I knew there was a chance that I could make it back and take a shower before the Le Meridian Hotel, stop my card from accessing the room. So I was like, okay, I need to get through the shoot as fast as possible, which was kind of disappointing. Honestly, if anyone from the Indy Marathon is watching this, like maybe just do a double check that your hotel partners can actually accommodate marathon runners, because I missed out on a lot of cool stuff at the end. Like I know they had like a drink ticket on the bib and like, stuff you can do. I was just trying to get through there as fast as possible. So I was just like a mess. I was stumbling all over the place. I was just trying to get to the end of the shoot. At the end, they were handing out canned water. I grabbed a banana. They had hats they were handing out, which is pretty cool. I think they had other stuff, but I just like did not have time to focus on hanging out. I was just trying to get to the end of it and then get over to where I thought the hotel was. That was the other thing. I didn't really know where my hotel was. So I get out of the chute, I called my wife, and then I'm like trying to mess with my Apple Watch to like give me the navigation, and I like can't, it's not picking up like Le Meridian Hotel. It'll be like Lexington, Kentucky. Like it just would not give me anything. So I'm trying to like do the like typing thing. It's an absolute mess. So finally my wife found me and like dragged me back to the hotel. I made it in time. I did not let the hotel win. I was able to take a shower. I walked through the lobby in my race gear, dripping in sweat, but I made it back. I took a shower. It was an okay shower. Water pressure wasn't great, but it was way better than nothing. So yeah, that was my race. All in all, awesome race. First of all, I got my time. I smashed my time. This is probably the first time since I can remember, since like high school, where I set a goal, 3 hours and 30 minutes, and I beat that goal. In previous marathons and half marathons that I've run in my like 20s and 30s, I have set a goal and I may have gotten my PR, but I didn't hit that goal. I got a cramp or I had to walk or like whatever reason, I never hit that goal. This time I actually hit the goal, which is pretty cool. So I was fired up about that. Obviously, I got my PR. The course itself was awesome. I really, really enjoyed running this. The first thing, it's very flat, so like you're not going to have to worry about huge hills. It's a big loop, so you don't have what the old Cleveland Marathon course had, where it's like an out and back. So you're running and you see people coming your way, and then you can also see the mile markers on the other side. So it's like I'm at mile 16 and I see the mile 22 mile marker. Like to me, that just like messes with my head. This was a big loop. There was lots of fan support along the way, tons of aid stations, just a really good marathon. Yeah, it got a little bit crowded at the start, and if you run with a big pace group, there might be some areas where you get kind of pinched, but otherwise, like, it was not a big deal. I easily was able to navigate that course. The pacers were awesome. You know, the event center was a great place to warm up. So all in all, it was an awesome marathon. Of course, the hotel situation was a little less than ideal, but at the end of the day, it was motivating for me to get back and take a shower and not let a hotel conglomerate ruin my day. They did not ruin my day. I had a great day. I had the best day of running. I would definitely say that this was the best run I've ever had. And I've always kind of questioned, you know, will I be able to top my high school senior year 5K cross-country PR of 17 minutes and 44 seconds. This hands down tops that. I felt like it was a complete race. I trained the hardest I've ever trained in my life for any race, and it paid off. So yeah, all in all, an awesome event. I highly recommend the Indy Marathon. If you're thinking about it, definitely do it. Let me know if you have any questions about it, if there's anything else I can answer. But that is kind of my race breakdown. I hope that was useful. I hope that wasn't too like self-centered about my pace and my own times, and you know, you can get a little bit of information out of it that will hopefully be helpful. But yeah, like I said, if you have any questions or comments, or if you've run the Indy Marathon and, you know, have your own experiences that you'd like to share, definitely leave a comment below. But that will be the video for today. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon.